Now guys, with Google Stadia planning to launch in November already, which is only a few months away, I think it's time for us to look at everything we know so far, including some of the reports of people who had a chance to try it early, and try to evaluate its chances of becoming a success. Now when I first heard about Stadia, the big news for me was not that there's another cloud gaming service out there. The news was that Google, with all their power and their infrastructure and their money, jumps on the cloud gaming market and really takes a stand, right? If Google jumps on a market like that, that means they really see a future in it. And I think we can all agree that there's definitely a future in cloud gaming. But cloud gaming has a rather long history. Already in the year 2000, I don't know if you know this, but a company called G-Cluster demonstrated cloud gaming technology at E3. On Live then launched 10 years later, officially in March 2010, and in 2015 they shut their services down and sold everything to Sony, which then probably fed into PlayStation Now, which is Sony's cloud gaming service. Xbox has also promised trials of their xCloud gaming service, as they called it, later this year. And in fact, there was a partnership announced between Microsoft and Sony in May 2019, where they said that they're going to work together on a common cloud gaming solution. So it's definitely a big thing. The cloud gaming market is in full force, and I think everyone agrees that there's a massive opportunity for subscription-based gaming, and it's basically a new business model within the industry. However, the question remains, can cloud gaming work in 2019 or in the next few years, right? Like up to 2023 or something. Is there a market for that kind of cloud service? Can it work so well that it might convince gamers to leave their PCs or consoles behind and focus solely on cloud services? No, in my opinion, it's not. Mainly because of the technical limitations. When I use my Steam Link from one room to the other with a perfect wired setup and minimal latency, some of the games remain still unplayable. Anything that requires accurate timing, like any twitchy competitive first-person shooter games, I don't know, PUBG, Apex Legends, Call of Duty, anything like that, or even games like Rocket League, or like Formula One simulators that require precise timing, are literally unplayable. And that is the scenario from one room to the next. So a big portion of games simply cannot be played in a satisfactory manner despite a perfect wired setup between two rooms right next to each other. And that is the main issue that Stadia will have to overcome. But how are they going to do that? I mean, unless you can predict the movement of players before they push a button on their keyboard, and you just simply can't do that, right? I mean, Google seems to talk about, improving latency and working hard on a system that tries to decrease latency by having parts of your game read out on your local machine, and that's then sent to the server. So not the full game is rendered on their server, and they're kind of mysterious and not very open about how they're going to do it. But the problem persists, right? Because you still have to render the actual game on a server that is potentially hundreds of miles away from your local machine. One interesting thing was they showcased Doom Eternal on Stadia at GDC 2019, and there already we heard plenty of voices that kind of aligned perfectly with my concerns. Doom Eternal is a very fast-paced, reaction-based shooter, which doesn't really work, in my opinion, even with the smallest amount of latency. And keep in mind, at GDC, you're probably not playing from a server that's hundreds of miles away. They will have some kind of setup where they're streaming from a local server, and already that, having the server probably somewhere in the GDC convention building, already that caused major concerns. But that doesn't mean that no games can be played on Stadia, right? Like exploration-based games, for example, single-player, story-based titles like Assassin's Creed or even Borderlands 3 are probably fine. Like one scenario where I can really see Stadia work perfectly is in a feature where you try games after watching a trailer. So you might watch a trailer for the next Assassin's Creed game on YouTube, which by the way is also Google, and then you just click a button after the trailer that says try the demo now, and you get an instant Stadia version opening up in your browser, allowing you to take a look at the actual game. It's basically a marketing tool at this point, right? You're promoting games, and I would totally use that, right? If I would watch a trailer and it says, hey, try the demo now, I would totally click that and try it out in my browser. Why not? Another massive problem is that Google proposes to sell games on Google Stadia at full price. So on top of a $9.99 per month subscription fee, you're asked to pay the full price for any game. And to me, that is the final nail in the coffin of Stadia as an independent game platform, at least, that tries to compete with consoles or with Steam. Because you get a compromised experience due to the latency. You're expected to pay more than when buying the game for a console because of the subscription fee, and then you can't even be sure how long you will actually be able to play the game, because if Stadia goes out of service in 5 years after launch, And Google, by the way, is known for binning services that don't work as predicted. I mean, Google Plus is probably the best example. I mean, they put a lot of work and research and development into that, and then it didn't work. People didn't sign up, so they're just canning it. They're like, let's just get rid of it. And if they do the same with Stadia, then all the games you bought at full price will not be accessible anymore. I mean, maybe Google applies a higher standard at a platform like Stadia, saying that, you purchased all those products, while in Google Plus you didn't purchase anything really, but you purchased those games, so they should remain accessible to you. But that's just speculation. We don't know that. If Google decides to can Stadia because it wasn't financially successful, then all your games that you paid for are gone. But with this model that I just described, right, paying full price on top of a subscription fee and all that, it seems that Google is very confident in their product. Despite early access testers of Stadia having reported that Stadia still has massive latency issues, they don't say it's a mess, but it could be better, and the latency is definitely still there, especially when trying Doom Eternal. People reported dying several times in the first level, right? People who are experienced in playing first-person shooters. So doesn't look too good. However, we have to say that cloud gaming has come a long way since OnLive in 2010, but the technical hurdles just can't be overcome at this point, at least in my opinion. By the way, I did an OnLive review. I don't know what year that was. I'll link it down in the description. It's actually quite interesting to go back and look at a review of OnLive from that time when it was still working and kind of just compare it to the things that Google is saying now. But like I said, I think internet infrastructure has improved over the last 10 years, but it's not at a point yet, and I don't think it will be at a point in the next 3, 4, 5 years, at least not at a large scale, where it can really deliver a latency-free experience. I mean, that won't work anyway. Any game that you stream from a server that's hundreds of miles away, even you have a 500 or 1 gigabit connection, there will be latency, because your movement of your mouse and the push of the button on your keyboard has to be sent 500 miles away and then has to be sent back to you as a visual response in the game. So there will always be latency, but that is exactly what Google is pretending that they have solved, right? And instead of addressing the latency and going into more detail about how they solved it, they shift their messaging away from that issue. And they talk about how they hired Jay Raymonds to work on exclusive games, right? They open a studio where they work on games. Presumably it's going to be one game, I think. They talk about multi-GPU rendering and how superior the visuals are. And I'm just sitting here being like, yeah, but all this doesn't matter if the games lag, right? You can have great multi-GPU rendering with details that I could never achieve on my local machine. But if the game lags, it's kind of pointless. So in conclusion, I think there's great potential in this, especially when it comes to bringing in new audiences that never really play games, except maybe mobile games or something, and they are only looking for a quick and simple experience. Not everyone wants a console under their TV, but they might want to try the new Sims game, or they want to play the Just Dance game at a party or whatever. So I can see some use case for this. So as long as Google kind of aims for those audiences, I think it's all good. But currently they don't. They show core games like, Doom and Assassin's Creed, suggesting that they want to conquer the console and PC market. And I think that's just wrong messaging, because that's not going to happen, at least not in the foreseeable future. So I think Google needs to be more upfront and honest in what their services can actually offer, right? I think they should say from the start that some games will not run on Stadia. They will not be playable, like Doom, like Call of Duty. But I understand that that would be very questionable from a marketing point of view, right? Because you're basically admitting to latency. You're like, oh, these games won't run. It's not possible to play those games because of latency issues. And it will raise all kinds of questions where people are like, oh, but why Assassin's Creed is fine, right? That's not fine with latency either. And you start a debate you don't really want to be in. So I understand why they don't really address it. But at the same time, I feel they need to be more upfront about what they actually can realistically deliver. And I think if they don't do that, there's not a big chance of it being a success, at least like in entering the core gamer market at all. I mean, be honest, be realistic, which is not going to happen, right? They're not going to do that. So I think it's going to end up basically being a marketing tool that pops up after trailers and that some people might use, like I said, in like really rare use cases at a party where you just want to have a quick game of Just Dance or something along those lines. But not to say that it will be a complete failure. I mean, I was surprised in the past. I remember when iOS was first introduced with the iPhone, I was like, who's gonna play anything on that? You know, it's pointless. Why do you do that? None of the games are gonna come out on that platform, and it's kind of a pointless exercise. And then I was proven wrong, because a lot of games were dedicated, you know, were developed to be dedicated on that system, and they just kind of created their own whole ecosystem. And that might happen with Stadia, that they really bring in completely new audiences, offering completely new game experiences to them, much slower games, you know, more exploration-based games, and games that work on a streaming service. It is possible. But when it comes to the core game sector, which is a lot built around fast-paced games and just games that require you to have a local machine because you can't handle that latency, then I just can't see it being a success, really. But guys, I mean, what do you think? What are your thoughts on this topic? Do you think Stadia can sustain itself as a competitor to the consoles and the PC market? And if so, where do you disagree with my points? What are your thoughts on this topic? I'd be really curious to hear your thoughts down in the comment section below. If you liked the video and if you enjoyed it, then please leave it a like. You can subscribe to the channel. You know, I don't do that many videos, but recently I rediscovered my joy of making these kind of videos. So I'm kind of making more content in recent weeks, and I plan to do that a bit more. So I hope to see you back again on the channel. You can subscribe, you can hit the bell, do all the good stuff. I'd appreciate to see you back. Guys, again, I hope you enjoyed it. I'll see you next time, and I'm out. Bye.